Welcome to Refused Flank, a wargaming podcast exploring the intersection of competitive excellence and narrative storytelling potential.
Hey, welcome to Refused Flank. I am Grant.
And I'm Cam.
We're here today to talk about our most played system, at least together. That is Warhammer Fantasy Battle 6th edition, released in 2000. I have a lot of things to say about this, Cam. I assume you do too.
Yeah, so we're going to try to keep it short, not spend 4 hours talking about it. Hopefully we can keep it to 30, 45 minutes. Just hit the high-level stuff, the really key things about why we're excited about this old edition, why we still play it.
Right. I guess we'll just get right into it. So for me, the thing I wanted to start off, right, and you could probably mirror this, is that this is a complete or finished system. We kind of talked about it a little bit in our intro, but it almost feels like it's, just by that being the case, it's not current. You're almost given more permission to house rule and change things.
Yeah, to fit your context, your group of players, the armies that you're bringing to the table.
Absolutely. It feels a little easier to get other players on board to do that because they're like, oh yeah, GW's not going to release a splat book that changes everything in 6 months or whatever. Kind of just everybody's all in this together and they're acknowledging, hey, we're going to play this, but we're kind of tuning it a little bit. So I love that about it. Another big thing for me, and what's really unique, if any of the viewers or listeners rather are familiar with fantasy and the history of it, the changes, I've kind of gotten into that over the past few years, is 6th and 7th edition fantasy really kind of shook things up in terms of army construction. I'm not really familiar with 1st, 2nd, or 3rd edition fantasy. Those are really old school. I know 1st and 2nd are basically RPGs. Mm-hmm. 3rd, I guess, is where you start to see a mass rank and flank game.
Right, it's a little more similar to what we were imagining.
Right, I'm told it's incredibly, actually pretty complicated and involved. There's a lot of like custom formations and stuff, which sounds cool, maybe someday. But 4th and 5th is where you can really start to see, okay, this is fantasy. But they all use army building, and here's my point. They use percentages. It's like in 8th edition, and now the old world does this as well, where it's like you have to spend 25% of your points in an army on core, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Specialists max at 50, rares max at 25, heroes are 50 or whatever, something like that. 6th and 7th uses like a slot system, almost more like 40K's force org chart, mm-hmm. at least in Middle Hammer, kind of what I'm familiar with. And I really like that because it really lets you skew up. You can't take a lord until 2,000 points. And because we've done a lot of slow grow building campaigns, it's really lent a lot of character to those early forces. Because if we're playing like a really small game, we're playing 750 points, mm-hmm. and you have to take 2 slots of core, you're probably taking over 25%. You know, to hit your limit just in core there. So already it feels like in the small games, core is taking up a bigger percentage, and I like that, number one. Also, heroes are just capped more. You know, you could play mm-hmm. a 1,500 point game. There's not going to be a vampire lord. There's not going to be a slan mage priest. There's not going to be, you know, a chaos lord or a demon prince or something crazy. Now, there's smaller versions of a lot of those things, but it limits it, and it kind of, I just love that about it. And that's pretty unique to 6th and 7th Ed Fantasy, 6th specifically too, because they limit mounts by slots as well. 7th kind of let their foot off the gas there. But that's the thing I love about it. I guess, do you have any comments on that, or you want to take it?
Yeah, that actually is one of my notes as well. I really like 6th edition's emphasis on regular troops. Yeah. And I think you referenced the force org charts from 40K in this era. And I think the whole, like, if you play historical games, a force org chart is like, I literally went and looked, like, what did the U.S. Army field in a normal platoon
the order
in
of
1944? Battle. Like, and you're trying to figure out, like, how would this actually make sense? And I like that that's what this slot system and things like the force org chart are doing, are trying to make you build an army that is good, but also that reflects what a normal force would actually look like on a real battlefield. And I think that's where the groundedness for me in 6th edition kind of comes in. This is one aspect of that, of feeling like this is a medieval battlefield with fantasy elements happening, but it's not just like, oh, I have an army of like archangels that are just going to come slaughter everything instantly. It's like, it's not about that. It's about an army of troops fighting that has some big monsters, some specialized troops, some heroes, but it's not the be all end all. You can't just build something around
for sure
something awesome like that. And I think for me, a lot of that comes as a kid. I loved things like Battlefield 1942, Star Wars Battlefront, where I'm just playing the regular dude running up trying to take the point. That's way more interesting to me than playing as Master Chief or something like that.
I
which
see.
you know I have fun doing that as well, but
Sure.
it's just more interesting to me to be playing in a system that emphasizes the importance of the regular troops, the core kind of a thing. And like you said, the heroes I think are well tuned in this edition, where there are powerful heroes, but they're not unstoppable.
Right.
It's really rare that you're taking somebody like Archaon, the demon, you know, like the Chaos Lord. Yeah, exactly.
Cost 900 points or something.
Exactly.
800 some points.
Yeah, and I think you can contrast that now to modern Age of Sigmar and 40K, where it's like literally I'm bringing a Primarch to this battle that's happening on this tiny, which I guess you can argue like, oh, it's part of a bigger battlefield, things like that. But that's just never interested me. I've always wanted that smaller scale, like zoomed in, more anonymous characters that I get to then embody with my own stories, my own names. I can create the characters that I want to create and that sort of a thing. And that's cool on a narrative side. I think on a gameplay side, it's also just nice to know, like, okay, these characters can have a cool duel. They can kill more guys than the regular guys next to them, but they're not going to bulldoze an entire army. Like, even a kitted out Chaos Lord isn't going to take on an entire regiment of somebody else's core troops. And that feels right. It feels a little less like a crazy action movie where one guy is cutting down swaths and swaths of guys, and a little bit more realistic where it's like, no, they're all going to go attack that guy at the same time, and they're all going to stick a spear at him at once.
They're going to
just die.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's that flows right into one I had here too, which is infantry. So infantry and just infantry versus cavalry in fantasy over the years, I think has really waxed and waned. I think you could look at 4th and 5th editions. I'm going to say, generally speaking, infantry is pretty bad. But then again, heroes are just so powerful, especially certain 5th edition stuff you look at. 6th edition, I feel like, has kind of hit that sweet spot as best as it could within reason. I think you could make some tweaks there. But infantry is usable. They're not always super killy, but you can use them. And they'll win combat through numbers and ranks and just all that. Now, some people might not always love that. I feel like they expect 8th edition, which is where infantry is really good because of stuff like Steadfast and Step Up. So where it's like, yeah, this Witch Elf Horde is going to have like 40 attacks and I'm just going to kill like 12 guys in this combat. And it's like in 6th edition, it's like if you kill like 3 or 4 dudes, you're like, wow, man, I just mauled that guy. It's like, wow, 4 guys died. That's crazy. And it's almost so stripped down. Cavalry's certainly good. I mean, I think we can both acknowledge that. But it feels like if you just have a group of 5 knights or something, Empire Knights, and you just charge into, I don't know, 20 orc boys, 5 wide, 4 deep, they're probably going to lose that combat. You know, they might kill more than they take. They might not even lose anyone, but they're still going to lose. And I love that. And I think a big part of that is the 4 wide rank bonus. That is unique to this edition, I believe. Don't quote me on 5th and 4th. I'm not as familiar with those, but after this, 7th made it 5. And the reason being, I think, is just people like how it looks better, which
you can have your banner right in the middle.
Yeah, something about that, and I can kind of get
sell
there.
More models.
But or to sell, yeah, fair enough. But I feel like this hit that sweet spot to where infantry is able to kind of hold its own for the most part. There's certainly some units that I think could use some help, but generally speaking, you know, they're totally usable. They're not always the best, but it works, and it doesn't feel like it's just, oh, the cavalry charged and took over the game.
Unless you're Bretonnia.
Unless you're Bretonnia, which we always joke about. But
I think that also helps emphasize the mixed unit tactics, which is much more interesting. I think it's a deeper gameplay experience if you have to think about that your cavalry is this sort of fast attack flanking unit or something that's used to disrupt weaker elements of the line, rather than just this Death Star that you can shoot straight into the enemy and know that you'll bowl them over. You actually have to think about, how are my blocks of infantry working with the cavalry in order to maximize both of their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And I think that's just a more rewarding play experience rather than this sort of like just point across the table and unleash, and you're just like throwing a bowling ball across the table and you know it's going to smash anything that it hits. That's just less interesting.
For sure. And the push and the pull of it a little bit. You can see that in Old World, right? Where it's like stuff they get jostled back. This doesn't have quite that level of granularity, but there's just a lot more interplay between units. I agree with you 100%. Any follow up? I guess you got any highlights? We want to go from there. Otherwise, I can just roll into the next one.
Yeah, I'll throw one of mine in just to break it up here. One of the big pros for me, which is something I think about with kind of any war game I'm getting into, is the amount of lore that's provided. And I think that I like it when it feels like there's enough lore to create depth in the background, but there's enough open space for me to, again, create my own stories within it. And I think 6th edition does that really well. There's so much lore, but so much of it is like this little short story about this one battle that happened this one time.
Right.
And it's like really inspiring, but I don't have to feel like I have to play with that in mind about what I'm about to go do. And I know where all these different places are and kind of how the factions are interacting with each other. But in the way that the lore is written in the main book and the army books, it all is often giving you all of these little plot hooks and things that you could run with, little spaces where you could carve out your own little space within the old world to do something of your own. Obviously, the Border Princes is an example of that, where they like really push that as like anybody could be here doing anything. So run wild.
It's crazy, and they did that on purpose. Which is smart.
Yeah, and I think that exists just throughout the rest of it as well. Like obviously, Lustria and the Southlands are big, vast areas. The Chaos Waste, there's so much stuff going on there. The vastness of the Empire, like there's the big cities, but there's so much other land and forest happening there.
You could do anything for sure. And they've got the huge characters, but they're so larger than life, especially in this edition. Kind of like what you said earlier. It's like Archaon's only going to show up to the biggest, most epic battles. He's not just showing up to the, little skirmish or whatever. He's the ever chosen, right? He's not leading a little 1,000 point war band. He's leading the army of chaos.
Right, exactly.
Right, and so it kind of makes them, when they do show up or whatever or drop down, it's like, wow, there's that guy. Holy crap, But then the rest, it's like you can fill it in with whatever you want and make your own characters. So that's super cool.
Yeah, and I like that it gives you, again, enough connection so it doesn't feel like I have to make up everything. Like my characters still feel like this guy's an Empire captain and that means something to everybody else that I say it to. But then I get to add into that, like, who is he? Where is he from? What kind of troops is he running? That sort of a thing. And I think the more you can do that, again, the easier it is to engage with the narrative of like, okay, now that I know what type of guy this is, when certain things happen in the battle, I can interpret that in a way that's consistent with this type of character and that sort of a thing, which I think is cool. And I mentioned this before, but I'm not a fan of named characters. I'm not as into situations where I have to be playing as this specific person, and it feels a little bit more like, well, now we're just replaying the lore. I want to make new lore, and I want to be a co-creator. And I think 6th edition really invites you to be that kind of co-creator in the lore, in the narrative, with all of these things. So I just love the amount of plot hooks that are there, the amount of inspiring, intriguing things without it telling me exactly what I need to play and how I need to play it.
Okay. Running with that, I guess, and I'm going to go with big highlight for me is the army books and how many different magic items are in each of them. 8th edition and a lot of, well, specifically 8th, and I guess kind of 5th too, although 5th is fun for different reasons. But it's all these individual, like they have a little write-up, even a little lore blurb about what it is. And we can talk all day about some being so horrible or so broken, for sure, but I just love that each army's got its own little repertoire to pull from.
It feels so fitting for that army, the way that they're described.
I love that, and that kind of goes back to what you were just saying, where you can build your own character. It's like, oh, this is, I made up an old blood. What did I call him? It's a heck. And I'm like, oh, and I can kit out It's a heck. He's got the, a 5-up ward, but it's not just the 5-up ward, amulet of preservation or whatever. It's the glyph necklace or something, and it's something unique to him, and he's got it. No one else in the army can have it. I love that whole thing, and I think certain 8th, I guess specifically, it's just like, oh, this is a vampire lord, and he's got the ogre blade, and everybody else's vampire lord always has the ogre blade or whatever, and it's just, well, I have an ogre blade, you probably have an ogre blade too, and it's just like, I don't know, it kind of takes some of the magic away for me. The magic, air quotes, I mean, like the niceness, I don't know, the uniqueness of it all. I really love that.
Yeah, I totally agree. My other point is pretty similar to this as well, but I think this whole era in Games Workshop really felt like that invitation to being part of developing and building and hobbying together. And that's on display in this rule book, where there's things about building terrain, how to paint your models, ideas for battles. I think even
something happened in 2006, man. I don't know, where like all the books came out, and then it's like, instead of just showing, hey, this is a creator's army, and it's like, oh no, here's just pictures of the catalog.
Yeah, exactly. And the terrain that is showing me how to build in here feels like something I could actually build.
Right.
And it's not just a plastic kit that they're selling. And it definitely shifted more towards that, where they weren't as much supporting the full customization, the like kit bash, use stuff from other model lines, from other people that sell models. Like, it doesn't even have to be all Games Workshop, and like, you know, maybe we sell this part of it, but you can bash that with this other part of it, or you know, there's the classic land speeder from the deodorant bottle, you know, kind of thing.
Oh, yes.
That's all that they were a part of that. And, you know, they're releasing books like the General's Compendium at this time, things like how to build war games terrain, all of those, the Illustria expansion, all of that stuff was just chock full of hobby awesomeness that was just, again, so inspiring, so inviting for me to get invested and involved and want to build out the world and do all of that. I think, to go back to your army building point, another aspect of that was the Dogs of War list, and that let you really customize. And so, for example, something really static and stoic like the dwarfs don't have any fast units. Like, there's none. They have the gyrocopter, but that's it. They don't have any skirmishers. They don't have any cavalry. But you could take a Dogs of War unit, and then now you can invent, like, they could just be some hired mercenaries that you got from the Empire. But that's an opportunity, and they actually have examples of this in White Dwarf, in the different books and things. But like, use that as an opportunity to make the dwarf pony riders or goat riders that you wanted to be part of your specific dwarf army. Yeah, exactly.
You've done this. Cam specifically made, we did for our last campaign, finished just recently. You had some like dwarf golems, which were like monstrous infantry.
Yeah, and we just ran them as these like Dogs of War ogres.
Right.
Okay, so now we have something that fits. It's not like I'm just making stuff up and I'm gonna accidentally make them too powerful or too weak. It's like, no, this is a pointed unit that I can legally take in my army, but I can just make them stone rune golems instead of ogres. And now that looks really cool. It's really specific to my army. And so, yeah, it just lets you do that in a way that doesn't feel as much like we're just house ruling everything and everyone has to kind of be like, oh, what's Cam going to bring this time? Because it's legit. And I love that they just built that into the system. It wasn't something that had to be
and every army can do it.
Yeah, exactly. So just this opportunity to bring that further customization that I just really love and really felt like they wanted you to do. They were supporting you doing it. They really wanted that to be a part of the game, the system, the hobby.
Right. Sorry about if there was any noise there. My cat just pulled my mic off. Hopefully it's not too bad.
But yeah, that's all my pros.
Okay, I've got one more that I really want to, actually two. I'll speed run it. Psychology matters a ton in 6th edition, and it's hard to mitigate.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the emergent narrative thing. Fear checks, you can't reroll BSBs. Panic checks, you can't reroll with BSBs. Some people might not like that. Because it's, it's out of your control. You can't mitigate it super well, but I like it. I like not feeling in control of certain parts of it. And I'm going to contrast with my next point, which is that movement really matters. Charges aren't random. I think a lot of people go back and forth on that because they like pre-measuring. And if you have random charge lengths, you can pre-measure. And that gets rid of a lot of that, I don't know, gaminess of like, oh, did you measure for the and then you looked over there, and I don't know. But when you're playing amongst friends, I don't think that really ends up being an issue. But I love that movement is king in this game. The ranges are long in certain circumstances, but at the end of the day, like, your average trooper's charging 8 inches.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gaminess, I guess, a little bit to that, but that's the gaminess I like. But then it's like, at the same time, maybe you just push your dudes up and they cause fear and the guy fails his fear check. And then you're like, yeah, it is what it is. And they're like, no. But I love that. So you're in control for the most part. There's stuff like stupidity. But you're in control of the movement. And that's really where I think it can separate the good players who have a lot of experience from the players who aren't as experienced, and deployment is part of that as well. But then at the same time, the good player could just fail his stupidity checks or whatever all the time and is guys don't do anything or whatever, or hey, you just failed panic checks. It was unlikely. Maybe you were a dwarf player and you failed on a 10, but you failed, and it's like, but that can tell such a cool story, and I feel like it's almost been too mitigated in later editions to where it's like which again, some of the more competitive people might like, but I like not being in control, and I think this system balances that really well. But then I guess we can move into the things we don't love so much.
Yeah, I've got one that kind of comes off of what you're just saying there. I agree. I love that movement matters. I love that positioning is really important. It helps feel like, again, that mixed unit tactics is important.
Sure.
I can't just push everything forward and know that it's going to work perfectly.
Yeah.
You actually have to have some backup plans. You have to think about strategically, how far are you going to move up, that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I love the guess range weapons. That's just so fascinating to me. I love friction in a war game where I just don't know for sure that something's going to happen every single time that I do it.
Right.
But I think that can create some frustrating circumstances where it's hard to be as precise as that actually requires. And I think that comes back into what we've talked about before, like War Machine, where like you just want to play with the flat terrain because you can be more precise. Or it's like, well, if this is just on a hex grid, then we wouldn't have to worry about the half inch that was I in or out.
We've definitely had to move terrain about to try and be kind of close, because it's like, oh, that charge is going to be within half an inch or whatever.
And I generally am totally in favor of we're friends here, we're just having a game, and we're here to collectively tell this story together. But there are those moments where it feels like if you get this charge off, my entire line is about to crumble, and that's going to feel really bad. I really didn't think you were going to be in range, and you really think you are in range, and I really think you were kind of going through the woods there, and that would have slowed you down enough. But now I feel like I'm being pedantic by making us stop the game to go look at that.
Your one dude clips the woods there for about an inch, so that actually slows down the entire unit.
So I think that's a frustration because it's a tension there where it's like I like aspects of that, but it feels like the way the system is built can end up running into some of those problems. And I guess this is also tied to another one I have, so I'll just throw that in here now.
Let's go for it.
It's the tension between the really evocative lore that makes me want to build these beautiful battlefields, and then mechanics that make me feel like I just want to play on a blank table with no terrain, because it just gets in the way. It just makes things harder, causes people to have these discrepancies between them. And so that's just really hard for me because I love the spectacle of it. I love the feeling that I'm playing on a real battlefield. I don't want the 40K tournament setup where it's like there's these 6 exactly identical buildings that have to be laid out in this specific way. And that's how we play the game. I want it to feel like, oh, this actually feels like there's a farmhouse there that has a road running past it, that there's a field kind of near the house and a barn. But that often creates, in Warhammer Fantasy, almost unplayable situations where it splits up your army in really awkward ways. And it's hard because it can sometimes be good. It creates tactically interesting situations that you have to deal with. But sometimes it can just lead to those frustrating arguments about the minutia of the movement rules and things like that. So I think for me, that's just like I don't have a solve. So I'm not saying like I would have done it this way, but it's just tough.
I'm gonna just jump into mine because I think my biggest negative is the terrain rules. Rules is written. So raw, just terrain, I think is way too punishing. You almost, unless you have a skirmish formation unit or some kind of thing that lets you ignore woods or whatever, it is just like almost rules is written, you don't even want to go in. It's like not worth it. It was even more punishing, I think, in certain editions, older ones, I believe, where you don't even get like rank bonuses if your ranked units are in the woods.
So which to some degree I get, because if you think about, in an ancient battlefield, like they're trying to find these open areas to fight because it would be disruptive to a formation. And that's where I think the tension is, where it's like, I get that. I understand the arguments that people make for why that makes sense mechanically, but it just then feels like I just have to play on a blank battlefield, which I also don't want. So it's just, I don't know.
We've kind of house ruled that in a lot of spots. 6th edition specifically has a lot of weirdness with that, and a lot of the older editions. I think as fantasy went along the way, they got more loosey-goosey with that. Like, oh, you get a free reform after combat winning or whatever. Like 6 has a lot of that staticky stuff, but like not being able to march through rough terrain, right? Isn't that the case in 6? We just house rule that. Just straight up. I don't think we played it ever without it, because that just feels really...
Right, we just would never if we played with it, we would just always put the woods on the edge of the battlefield.
Right, it'd be like, well, that is
yeah.
basically impassable if you're not a skirmisher. And maybe for some players who are listening to this who played a lot, like, well, that's the whole point. It makes skirmishers good. And I guess from our perspective, skirmishers seem good enough already.
Too good.
So but for me, that's kind of the biggest negative is, the pedanticness. It's hard to get away with a rank and flank game because every unit is so big.
Yeah.
You know, so and again, I guess with the movement like you brought up, so kind of a double-sided coin there.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. There's other ways to do it where I think Kings of War, for example, you do just pivot on the center all the time. There's no wheeling and things like that, which does simplify some of those issues. But then it just, again, takes one more step away from feeling like that's actually how the unit would operate on the battlefield. And so, yeah, there's just always going to be tension between whether you choose one way or the other. Yeah, there's pros and cons.
Yeah, and then I'll just jump into another one that I think kind of everything from there I think is you could really take or leave, and some people may disagree. But I'm going to say here, this is very specific, lapping round. I'm sure some people love this. I forget about it a lot of the time. And I'm kind of the rules weirdo in our group too. So I'm the guy who's got a lot of stats memorized for some reason. But I think it's very fiddly. I don't like having to pull guys off of my movement tray, put them back on. And I see the value. Yeah. I see what it's going for. I like it in some ways. But a lot of times I'm like, if they got rid of it, which they did after this, I don't feel like I miss it. For me, that's a thing I'm not in love with. I see the value. It kind of gives smaller, cheaper, hordy units a way to kind of surround a smaller, big guy that's coming in and trashing them. So I like that it's there sometimes, but it's like, I forget about it in unit versus unit situations, I would say all the time. Yeah. And I probably shouldn't be from like a trying to win standpoint or whatever. But yeah,
I'm the same way. I often forget, and then it comes around to the next combat phase. I'm like, oh, I could have lapped around. Do you mind if I like just put my guys up there? So, which again, in our group, everyone's like, yeah, sure, go for it.
But, so it's not been a huge deal, but it's not my favorite thing.
Yeah, I like, again, the intent behind it, but I wonder if there are just better ways to represent that. Because, for example, one of the biggest things it does is give you a couple more attacks, and it gives you the flank bonus, so plus one combat res. So that's pretty big.
But you might lose your rank.
Right, so then there's this balance. Yeah. So it is a really fascinating mechanic, but maybe there's some way to, again, mimic that advantage that you get by winning and having a bigger unit without having to actually pull guys off and put them around on an already crowded battlefield.
We should come back to that. I think there's a lot of things you could do with that. Maybe it's like giving extra attacks or something, like guys in the back rake fight, because then you're not moving people, which for me is the fiddly part that I don't like. Anybody who's playing fantasy, a lot of these units barely rank. I mean, we're doing our best. Some guys rank up flawlessly. It's not a big deal. Some guys, though, we're like, we have to like literally number like the order that these guys are going in, and it's just super fiddly having to take them off and move them. But yeah, and then I'll just from there flow into one more, and then hopefully then you can come in. And this is going to be kind of my double-sided, all-encompassing thing before my final point, which is magic. I love magic in some ways, and I don't like it in others. Yeah, I like it theoretically. I think it's streamlined from 5th, where it's this weird card game, which is its own kind of cool thing with all these cards and stuff. I like how it's simplified there, but I don't like that all these wizards are just kind of power batteries. I don't like how it almost encourages kind of an all or nothing sort of thing.
Very all or nothing.
So it's like, well, you either don't go into magic at all, and you just like maybe your army's got like some kind of built-in magic defense or dwarves or whatever, or it's like, oh, you brought a warrior priest for another dispel die or whatever. Something like that, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to just hope I don't get massacred, and I'm putting all my points elsewhere.
Hope the extra points make up for it.
Or it's like, no, I'm going for minimum 8 dice casting, and I'm going to try to just annihilate you, which goes back to this other thing. I don't love the magic lores. I think they were improved upon a lot in 7th. I think in 6th, the best spells are magic missiles, which I
feels that way.
Don't love. I think they should be, they should be okay, they should be usable, but they shouldn't be like the thing you're hoping to get, because it just kind of turns your wizards into shooting attack guys. And I think if you want that, you say, okay, we're going lore of fire. But it's like, I don't want to take Lore of Death and hope I'm rolling like Wind of Death or whatever, the 2d6
Right,
strength 4.
because then why didn't you just take Lore of Fight?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to take Lore of Death because I want like the cool signature Lore of Death stuff. And I feel like 7th Ed, they did a lot better. In 8th, they did phenomenal. Frankly, I love some of the magic in 8th. A lot of people think that's very divisive because it's super random with but the spells themselves, where it's like, it's not just, oh, I'm nuking you or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm going to buff my unit by like +2 toughness. It's like, wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And that feels like it's playing with the game state a little bit more in more interesting ways.
Yeah, I wish that they would have gone a little more crazy with that. You see some of it. Light's got some stuff. Dark's got a few things.
Yeah.
But I wish they went a little more crazy with it. Some people might like magic is just a bunch of nukes or whatever, and occasionally you'll see some other stuff or movement spells. But I wish they went a little more crazy there. But I do like how simple it is. I want to emphasize that. I don't think it's terrible.
Sure.
It works, but I wish they went a little more interesting, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess to respond to that, I agree in general. I like the way that the dice system works, where you have this general pool and you're kind of trying to decide how you're going to spend the dice,
right?
Trying to think about, are they going to try to dispel this, etc. So it creates this sort of mini game that's going on. And I like that to some degree, but like you said, that usually only really feels like it's working if both armies have pretty equal magic, and usually that doesn't end up being the case. It usually feels like somebody is way more powerful, and then it feels like, why am I even trying? Because they're just rolling so high on their dice, I can't dispel it, or they have so many dispel dice that unless I get Irresistible Force, there's zero chance I'm ever going to cast a spell with my 1 level 2 wizard. So I think that can be frustrating. And I totally agree. I would love more spells that were more about buffing. I mean, something that even gives you like some magical attacks to deal with something like Ethereal, which just feels impossible to kill.
I'm a vampire player. I'm the bad guy.
Things that would maybe help sometimes mitigate some of the really powerful stuff like fear or things like that, which, makes sense that like you don't want every unit to always not have to deal with that. But if there's some spell that's tough to cast, but if you get it off and now all of a sudden you don't have to worry about it next turn, that'd be really cool.
Right.
So maybe that's something we should try, is just playing some 6th Ed games with the 7th Ed spells or something.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's something I've talked about on that Facebook group before, just using 7th Ed's magic system. Because I think they tempered it a little bit, because in there, I don't know if you're familiar, each wizard there's a collective pool, but each wizard that brings dice, they have to be the ones to spend the dice.
Right, yeah.
So you can't have a situation, where it's the Slan comes, and then I've got 2 priests or whatever, or a priest, and then the Slan's using all the dice. The priest has to be the one, the skink priest, to use his 1 die that he brings or whatever, or 2 die. He can't just give them to the Slan. The Slan brings his own, and there's a collective pool, and some items put them in the collective pool. But it gets rid of this whole, like, some of these wizards are just batteries for the other guy, and then they carry a bunch of Dispel Scrolls.
Which you just cancel other people.
I think it's interesting, actually. I know we're going off the chain here, but I want to bring up Dispel Scrolls. What do you think? Because I think when we started, we don't use them pretty much at all. But I think we're starting to.
I think enough people have been nuked enough times where it's like, maybe I want 1 or 2 just for that one moment where it's like, oh, you're about to get 2d6 strength 4 hits on my unit, and I really need that unit to still be alive next turn, dispelled.
And it's interesting how it's kind of, because overall, we're pretty casual, right? So we're trying, but I think it's interesting how it's like, I'm starting to see like, oh, maybe we do need to have like, maybe everybody should start bringing one, because it's like, if I'm bringing a Slan or even just double Necro in a smaller game or whatever, it's like, oh man, Grant is resurrecting so many skeletons.
Yeah, you've ended games with more skeletons than you started with.
Yes, and it's just like, I can't do anything to stop him. Maybe you stop a spell every once in a while, I roll low or whatever, and you get them, or maybe you invested in Magic too. And we've had a few of those games, and those are really good, where it's like everybody's got 2 wizards or whatever, and it's kind of a 6v4 dice kind of thing.
Yeah, that leads into my next point, which isn't really a pro or con necessarily, maybe just a general thought that has some pros and cons associated with it. But that's something that we've done a lot of, is collaboratively build army lists so that we know that when we play this battle, there's going to be some semblance of balance. Because with a system like this that has so many different units and so many different ways to build your army, it's definitely easy to create situations where it feels really difficult for one side to even have a chance in certain situations. And I think Magic is one of the key times that can happen. We're going to talk about the Lizardmen book at some point, but I'm sure we'll mention that you can like kit out a Slan to just annihilate people and basically be unstoppable as they're doing that. But I think that's a really interesting aspect of this system is with all of the creativity and invitation to customize and all of that, there maybe is the opportunity. And I think, like you said, the earlier editions are coming out of this almost role-playing type of approach. And I think in this edition still is probably getting to the end of that era, but it almost feels like it would be so helpful to have a game master for most games because of some of the things we've said about the pedantic terrain and movement rules kind of creating awkward situations or having these really bad matchups that can accidentally happen, that sort of a thing.
Right.
And having somebody who's able to step in and have a sense of like, what is the scenario that's playing out and interject
What makes sense narratively for this to happen? Oh, the one guy clips the woods. No, they make the charge.
Exactly. And that'd be so much easier if there's some third-party person that doesn't have a stake in the game.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot nicer. And
for sure.
I think that's something that, I mean, historical war games often have game masters that have designed a scenario to reflect a historical battle and the way that that's going to play out. And they, you know, can even introduce hidden information that both players weren't aware of at the beginning, which I think is really exciting from a game design perspective to have that
for sure
opportunity. And so I would like to play around with that some more. It's a role that I sometimes try to take on when we have multiple games going on at the same time in the same house, or I'll ask somebody from the other table like, hey, can you come help? But I like what you said about approaching it from a what actually makes sense here. And this rulebook is full of caveats that say like, just try to do what makes sense. And like you read some of the erratas and FAQs from the time and they're just being like, come on, guys. Like, does that make sense? That doesn't make sense.
People who do clipping, rules as written, there's a whole thing in the main rulebook and it's like, this is how it should happen and what players should aspire for. Do that, guys. Just make more people fight. Nobody wants.
That's what we're here for.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think, like you said, our group is generally open to those things. And I think when you have a group like that, it's not as necessary that you have a specific games master who's doing that.
Sure.
But, I think the game also benefits from scenarios that have something more going on than just a pitched battle.
Yeah.
Because that's where I think a lot of the disparities can come in. A lot of Bretonia's potential weaknesses just are not there in a pitched battle. But if they have to be able to hold ground in certain spots of the battlefield, it's actually worse when they bust through your line and end up all the way on the other side of the table and can't circle back around. And I actually won a game in our last campaign. I think one of the 2 or 3 that I won was because that happened. And my dwarves were like slowly marching towards the center objective and the Bretonians blasted through my line and then just couldn't get back in time by the end of the battle. And I had the objective.
You had more unit strength or something?
So
okay, cool.
It worked out. So I think that, you know, playing scenarios really can help with the balance. It can help with putting an emphasis on the narrative of thinking about like, my guys are here to do this objective that's tied to a bigger story that's happening within this world. And now I can be thinking about it in those terms, not just the min-max zero sum. Am I going to win, have more guys at the end kind of a thing.
Sure.
And I think this rule book, again, is just full of invitations to do that. In the opening of the scenario rules, there's actually a line that says, you might have an army built that would beat every other army in a pitched battle, but how would they do in a last stand? How would they do if they were fighting a rear guard action? How would they do if they were ambushed in the middle of the woods?
Right.
And so it's like telling you, like, yeah, there's going to be broken army lists that you could build.
Probably,
so you might have to find ways to create still interesting tactical situations to play that out.
For sure.
So I think, again, that combination of, you would hope somebody who really wants to play well would love an opportunity like that. Like, I know this is a really powerful army, so put me in a really tough situation. We'll see how it goes. But those are hard to write. It's hard to write a scenario that still feels balanced. We've had a couple go haywire on us where a scenario just really didn't play out well. I mean, one even in the book, I don't remember what it's called, but it's the one where army starts in the middle. I think it's maybe just ambush. And then they come from
other
two sides.
Yeah.
But that just felt impossible for the attackers to win.
Right, because they're so far away, and that might be matchup specific. That's the thing. It's like, there's so many variables in this game. What armies are involved? That alone changes it. But no, I hear you there.
My last con. Oh, do you have more to say on that?
I don't. Okay. Why don't you go, and then I have one final one that I'm going to bring up, which will roll into kind of house ruling, I think.
Okay, perfect. My last con is related to what you said about psychology.
Okay.
I like a lot about the psychology. I like that it matters. I like that it's not necessarily fighting to a grinding death. You can't just break the line and that causes the battle to shift. That's way more interesting than just a grind fest, which I think happened in later editions where even in like 40K, it's like, no, you don't even run away. You just take guys off when you fail morale checks.
Yeah.
And it's like, what? That's just like
they ran
too abstract.
They ran away or whatever. Yeah.
And so I like that about it. But in 6th edition, there can be situations that feel so devastatingly bad where you just barely failed a break check that you really shouldn't have failed.
Right.
And then your entire unit gets rolled down and it had your 500-point Chaos Lord in it.
Yep.
And that just feels bad. There's no way around it.
I remember your specific reference for this.
Yes.
Yep.
And so I don't think there's any amount of narrative storytelling I can tell myself that makes it make sense that my Chaos Lord got run down by some dire wolves in the opening turns of the game before anything had even happened.
Yep.
And so I think that it's just, that can happen. It's rare. It doesn't often happen. Most of the time it feels right. It creates an interesting, engaging battlefield experience that makes me feel like I'm commanding an actual army on an actual battlefield.
Sure.
But sometimes that happens and it just creates really bad feeling moments.
Yeah, where you're like, oh man, I really have this cool unit. I've got a cool story for him or whatever. It's got this dude who's got a cool name, etc. I kitted him out with some magic stuff.
Yeah.
And they got flank charged by fast cav. I whiffed all my attacks on turn 2. They did really good on their attacks. I didn't get ranks. Oh, I lost, and they're gone, and they got ran down. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's just that can happen, and so that's a bummer that can happen. But I don't know that I would give up the other stuff I like about the psychology just to fix that. But yeah.
For sure. There's definitely some spiky moments that can feel bad about psychology. My final thing, and this is definitely coming from my side of things, because I'm kind of the weirdo who's really into the weapon stats and the unit stats. Elite infantry across almost all the armies, I think, are poorly costed. I think this was just the designers not quite being able to understand the value proposition there. Speed is so important. We talked about movement being so important. And them not being able to really seemingly understand that heavy armor by itself is just not a lot of defense.
No.
There are so many units in the game. I know if you guys are online, you'll talk about Phoenix Guard or Black Guard for Dark Elves. These 15, 16 point per model units that have heavy armor and tough 3. And
they're just going to all die before they get a chance to attack back against something that, of course, got the charge on them because they can just sit well out of range, so you can't charge them.
So and they're just so expensive to where that they don't get the benefit of that the other infantry have, where I said they're kind of okay. So, if the Phoenix Guard get charged by the one-off guy, they're still going to wipe them, but it's like a unit half their cost probably would have done the same thing.
Exactly.
And that's the problem. So, for me, I wish, and what I almost want to do, and I'm kind of proposing this live, is at some point I want to do like an army book pass, and I want to do our own little like 6.5 edition or something, and just tweak a lot of these little things that I feel like, man, I wish Phoenix Guard weren't terrible or whatever, or man, insert elite infantry here. There's a few units that could be, and it'll never be perfect, and I acknowledge that, but that's like the one unit type I feel like I see across the board that's pretty consistently poor in 6th edition. I'm sure I'm not thinking of the 1 or 2. Like, I would say Grave Guard are okay, but they break so many of the core rules already.
It's not really comparable.
I don't even, it's like they can't run. They actually have an okay armor save. They're tough 4. They've got a lot of stuff going for them. They lean into the good parts of infantry. But then you look at stuff again. I'm going to keep going back to Phoenix Guard. If you want a Lizard Med example, I don't think Temple Guard are particularly good for their points cost. I think Saurus are maybe a little undercosted, but Temple Guard are not. I mean, Stubborn's a big deal, but man, oh man, 18 points per model?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's just a lot. And I think I wish the edition or the designers, as it had gone, had maybe kind of corrected that. And what I'll say this finally. I wish Chaos Warriors were better.
Yeah, having played a campaign as Chaos, I agree.
We've played a lot of games as Chaos. I borrowed your Chaos a bunch of times. And that is such a core identity unit for this universe. So cool. And they're statted out. You just look at them as a new player, like, wow, weapon
They're
skill
gonna be
5,
awesome.
initiative 5, heavy armor. I'll just give them shields or whatever, and and they'll go in, and it's like they got 1 attack each, and they got good stats. Weapon skill is nice, but it's not like the best stat in the world to have.
They're easily outnumbered because, again, they're so expensive.
Yeah, they're not actually that much tougher than other units that are half their cost.
Right, that's exactly it.
And I really wish units like that, and those are the units that I think get a lot of people into the game, Sure, maybe we're a little weird. We get really excited about spearmen and stuff.
Sure.
But I think for a lot of people, they're excited about like the Phoenix Guard. They're excited about the Chaos Chosen. They're the Chaos Warriors. They're excited about, the Temple Guard, the what have you. Great swords. Maybe to a minor degree with great swords and Temple Guard, because I think they're still usable. But stubborn's a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
But still, I think they could be tuned up a little bit, and people get excited about those kind of centerpiece units.
Right.
For some people, it might be a big monster. For I think a lot of people, this is my unit.
Yeah, really cool regiment that just really showcases the style of the army. It has a big banner.
I painted them really well. I spent a lot of hours getting them set up. Fantasy, you got to paint a lot of models, you guys.
Yeah.
And you spend hours on them, and then you bring them down, and you're like, man, I wish I just brought more of the mooks.
Yeah, that's exactly my Chaos Warriors. I converted all of them so they don't have the hunched heads as much. I got new helmets that I 3D printed. I ordered online some awesome shields with like the classic looking faces on them and everything.
They look
got new
awesome.
Swords for all of them. They're one of my favorite units I've ever put together. And after playing a few games with them in that campaign, I just wished I had another 24 Marauders, because they actually held when they got charged and would win on static combat res.
Right, and just do what they say on the tin. And you could make a lot of changes. We're getting into balance a little bit there. But again, I feel like it's such a through line across all the armies for the most part. Obviously, to varying degrees, maybe Chaos Warriors and Phoenix Guard are more heavily affected than, the Great Swords and the Temple Guard. But
in general,
elite infantry just live up to what you'd isn't good enough for the cost. And either I want somebody to go through with a comb and just buff them all up somehow, or I want them to go through and just jack the points cost down. Something like that.
One or the other.
Something. So that's kind of my final just overall system thing that I don't love. But I think we both want to end on a positive note, because I think it's fair to say
we love it.
We love 6th edition.
We just finished a big campaign and it was great.
And I want to play more. So we should go over what armies we do play. I know we kind of share armies a little bit here, but I started with Lizardmen.
I started with Empire.
You started with Empire. And then I kind of, in our second campaign, I did Vampires. Or actually, no, that was our first campaign. Because when we first started, it was
we
really
were just playing one-off games.
We were playing one-off games, and you were Lizardmen and Empire.
Yeah.
And then campaign was Chaos Vampires.
Yep.
And then our second campaign, I kind of wanted to finish up the Lizards. So I kind of went back to Lizards for our second campaign we just finished, and you started Dwarves.
Yeah, which was my dream army as a child, and of course I had only dabbled in Warhammer Fantasy as a kid.
Right.
We got the 6th edition starter set and stuff, but never could get whole armies put together.
Sure.
And so, seeing all the pictures of the dwarf armies in the books and the magazines and everything, just absolutely, that was what I wanted. And then got an opportunity a few years ago to buy an almost entirely metal old army from 5th, 6th edition, and was just like at a surprisingly good price. And it's just so awesome. So I was really excited to put that together and be able to play with it.
Right.
A bummer that I lost almost every game of the campaign, but it was still a ton of fun. It got the army painted.
It did.
I'm looking forward to, I think, again, just some of the matchups were a little rough.
Yeah, for sure. I guess just to saying we're not leaving the system, I've got Skaven waiting in the wings. I probably got like 60 rats. And that's not even going to be enough for anyone who knows Skaven. I'm going to need to get a lot more, but they're waiting in the wings, and I want to use them.
And I've got a Vampire Counts army built and painted. I could add a couple more things.
Yeah, we could do Vampire v Vampire games.
That would be fun,
We got a lot of skeletons.
I could use another unit of skeletons for mine, but I haven't run them at all. I have them all done, and I've used them for Saga, Age of Magic, but I've never actually run them.
We need you to do Vampires next. You do Vampires next if we do it when we do another thing. But we wanted to bring up art and just some of our favorite pieces of art that we thought were really evocative in the core rulebook. Did you have any pieces you wanted to start with? Maybe we can go popcorn it.
Yeah,
go back and forth.
While I'm looking for mine, because it looks like I didn't actually write it down, I just want to say
mine.
Oh, well, then you go ahead and start.
Oh, okay. Well, do you want to say something before I get into it?
No, I'll just save it for the closing.
Okay. I'm on page 85 here, kind of a spread from 84 to 85. There's this, and I think we're going to see a theme here. There's this kind of black and white inked up Khorne Chaos Warriors thing. Real old school. It's probably from like 5th or 4th edition Chaos book. I don't know. Maybe it's new to this. I didn't do that much research into the artwork, I'll be honest. But it's really evocative. A lot of death and decay here. And Khorne Warriors are probably one of the better ways you could take Warriors because it minimizes a lot of their weaknesses. More attacks. Can't take panic checks. You're frenzied or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I love, more dispel dice, so you're protected. But just really, just gorgeous art. Really see the rage there. There are all these like bald dudes, and this is kind of this beginning of the grimdark for fantasy, because you look at 5th ed artwork.
Yeah, it's colorful.
It is
there's
so
some funny
vibrant
stuff where there's just like goofy things happening.
Right.
Yeah,
this is like 6th must have been, as somebody who didn't live through, or I guess I lived through it, but wasn't aware of the transition because I was like 7 when this came out, 6th edition. This must have been so different. People talk about the difference between the 5th ed Bretonia book and the 6th ed one. Like 5th is like, oh, this gorgeous, like the knights are so pure, they're chivalrous. And then the 6th ed book is like, yeah, they're chivalrous, but they just like actually hate the peasants.
Yeah.
And there's this whole
horrible, stuck up. Yeah.
Right. And there's this like kind of double-sided, dark, edgy undertone. And you know what? For somebody who probably would have been maybe a little too young, but when you're like 13 or 14, this is real like, this just goes into the male, like 14-year-old. Yeah. Oh, look how angry
you just hear
these
the
guys
heavy metal
are.
music looking at some of these pictures.
This is definitely angry white boy artwork, but I kind of like it. So.
Yeah, it was really hard to choose going through looking at these. I mean, some of the big battle scenes,
same ones.
Oh yeah, some of the big battle scenes are just so awesome, so evocative. One thing I noticed just going through and looking at all of them, trying to decide, was just how often you see Empire just getting totally annihilated by everybody.
Good call.
There's another image that I almost picked just because it was so formative as a kid. Of a bunch of chaos guys. They're like coming down the stairs, and then the guy at the front is just stabbing a sword into the side of an Empire guy's head, and it's just like, ouch, that looks painful.
Right.
I am not seeing mine here, but I ended up going, despite how much I like some of those really big battle ones that again really evoke some of the things that you're actually going to play out on the table. That's the one I was talking about.
Oh yeah,
guy getting stabbed
he's shanking him. Yeah, that's a good one.
There's just so many little ones too that just are really evocative, and this is the one I ended up going with, was on page 114. Okay. There's an Empire dude. He's on the ground. It looks like he just got knocked over or something, breathing heavily, but he's got his sword in his hand still. His armor still looks intact, and you can see on his face that he senses danger behind him. And of course, behind him, you can see there's a Skaven assassin that's about to stab him with a knife.
Oh,
and it's so evocative because there's still an active story happening here. Like, it could still go either way because he knows somebody's there. He could spin around, parry the blow, stab him, whatever kind of thing. But it looks like things are really rough for him. He's probably not going to make it out. So there's just so much tension in there. Again, it's that really, dark, contrasty ink type drawing. That it's just so good, and it doesn't need to be this big, massive battle playing out or anything, but it just zooms in onto this individual moment that's just so rich with storytelling potential. So yeah, I just love that.
I love that you bring that up, because I think I was drawn to the big ones, because I like to get lost in the background. A lot of, is it Blanche? Yeah. The guy with the really like wispy, there's almost so much going on, you can't even tell, like in some of those big artworks. I think, what is it, texture. That one with the Sisters of Battle.
Yes, that's
on the
iconic.
front with their foot on the skull or whatever, and you like look in the background in that piece of art, and you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking at points. There's just so much. It's so dense, but it's all wispy and kind of foggy, and you don't know where the sky begins and the ground starts. But I don't know. I love that sort of stuff. And actually, I'll just go with this one because it's the next on my list, and it's the page before, 113. Just on special rules, and it's this picture of all these Empire halberdiers, and it kind of for a similar reason, it tells a story. They're in this swamp, and there's these swamp trolls, and they're just having a battle, and you see the swamp vomiting on a guy, which is iconic. One of their rules. And the swamps, and the trolls just look so disgusting, but it kind of just, you see what I see in the game. Like I could see this happening. Like we've got the swamp terrain down, the halberd unit, and then there's a couple, swamp trolls, and they're just fighting it out. And I don't know, I love it. Yeah. I love it. And you see what you would see in the game.
And that's what's so evocative, I think, about the art, and having good art is, again, it helps you tell those stories and see things in that way. That was actually a runner-up for me, one of my favorite pieces there.
Right.
I love that some of the guys are like covering their eyes because they just got the vomit in the face. And then like a couple of guys on the outside are like, do I really want to run in there with my halberd and try to take this guy?
And you even see, look, on the...
Yeah, they got one.
They got one. There's one on the far left that's about to get his head chopped off.
Yeah, the guy's got like a big axe.
Right, and it's, I don't know.
It's so good.
It's perfect. You got another one from there, or was that really what you were going through?
I just went for one.
You just went for one? Man, I couldn't pick. I'll pick one last one.
All right.
I think I remember which one was my favorite overall, and maybe you'll disagree with me, but it's on page 158, which isn't marked, and it's kind of this full spread. It's a big piece of art that is basically a map of the old world, and it's this, I like it because I'm a map guy. I love maps, but it's got this, it's this black and white because of course, but this scribe, and you can see him drawing the map that you're looking at. Yep. And it's got the classic old school grimdark. There's skulls everywhere. There's way too many skulls. It doesn't make sense. There's candles on skulls. It's honestly pretty 40K looking.
Yeah, almost.
But and he's got like a little like lizardman like skull on his necklace or something, like a brooch. Details. There's just so much to it. And I find myself whenever I turn through this book, for whatever reason, I always pause on this page, and I love looking at just the little cities and where it is, and like what's Remus down in Tilia, and then I want to like look that up, and you could. There's lore for it probably, between the role playing games and just this universe being around for so long, and I just get lost in the world here, and it even says old world, like. This is fantasy to me, and
absolutely,
I just get sucked into this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you with the maps just being evocative. It's one of the things that pulls me in because you see these little details that's like, that's a space I could explore that doesn't exist in the written lore. I remember when I got Morrowind as a kid, it came with a map, and there was just some things on that map that weren't explained. They weren't even labeled, but it was like a weird little design thing, and if you went there and looked at it, there would be something there. Yeah. And so I think that kind of a feeling of like, there's something here to explore, and we're being invited to explore it is just exciting.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I'll end it there, but you had a point.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up with some overall thoughts. I think I've heard people say that your favorite edition is just going to be whatever was the edition when you first heard about it, got into it, saw some of the lore and sort of a thing.
Interesting.
And I think that's often true. That's probably the strongest indicator for most people. I think it's probably a big part for me because nostalgia is just so powerful. Sure. And so seeing a lot of these images as a kid at that time and getting that all just like burnt into my brain is like, this is what's Warhammer. Probably is a big part of it, but I don't think that's all there is. And hopefully everything we've said kind of gives you an idea of why we think this is still worth going back to, even if it wasn't the thing that's just a nostalgia trip for you, even though it is for a lot of people, it is for me. But I think there is specific things about the system that are worth returning to. And so if you aren't already playing it, I hope you'll find a way to check it out. There's plenty of battle reports on YouTube you can check out just to see how it plays. But maybe if you can find somebody to just try it out or try it online with Vassal or Tabletop Simulator or something.
Right. Especially if you're into Old World or whatever and you've never played the system before. I think it's worth looking back.
Yeah, just see where it came from.
You could probably, I'm not condoning piracy. You could probably find a PDF online of the core rulebook. There's great websites too that just have
book websites. You can get them pretty cheap.
Yeah, Abe Books. Look around, or just
books. Yeah,
right, all sorts of stuff. And give it a shot, if you can find it for $10-$20, I think it's worth a read just for the lore alone.
And the art.
And the art, so good.
Worth flipping through. And a lot of the books from this era are that. I mean, the General's Compendium, there's so much in there you could never use all of it. But it's just cool to read and look at and just be inspired by. Yeah.
This game system has turned me into a collector because now I own I think I own almost everything for 6 now. The only thing I don't have is Annual 2002. I've got Chronicles 03, 04, General's Compendium, all the campaigns, Dark Shadows, Lustria, Storm of Chaos, all the army books, sometimes in multiples. And it's just because I want to have all of it, even if, as you noted, in the General's Compendium alone.
Yeah, there's too much content for one person to use.
Of stuff. And I just think it really does a good job of kind of, and what I think why we're talking about it first is, and this is what made us want to do this podcast, is it has the emergent narrative, and it's got the competitive kind of skillful gameplay and decision
both
making.
Can exist. Yeah.
And they exist here in, I think, both sides, at least for us in our group. And I feel like for yours too, if you gave it an honest shot, you know.
Yeah.
And,
if you're looking for just the competitive and you want a really tight system that's going to work the same every time, this definitely is not it.
I don't think that's it.
But if you want to be able to bring some of that skill and some of those, you know, paying attention to mechanics and building a list that's going to be really good, like all of that does matter. But it just marries really well, I think, in this system with the narrative side of things.
You'll be frustrated with some of the psychology and some of all that sort of stuff. But if you're just looking for beer and pretzels like nothing matters, you might find yourself getting frustrated if you're just
because it is a little too dense.
There is a little bit of denseness, and you might get tripped up by some of the movement rules. And then
how far can you see into a woods? Is it 2 inches?
Right.
3 inches,
there's so many of
4
those little weird things. And then when the guy who does know what he's doing brings something a little more tightened and killer, you're going to be like, wow, I just got completely eviscerated. But no, I think it's a great system. I think everybody should take a look. I think there's a reason why it's with this edition in particular has stood the test of time. It's kind of in that perfect balance, and it's real low fantasy kind of. Yeah. It's real grounded. It's gritty. I feel like 5th is like high, like, oh my God. People are just nuking people with, like, you can get a magic weapon that just makes you strength 10, you know, like there's crazy stuff you can do, and your heroes are off the page, just colorful.
Yeah, and they probably could take out an entire regiment.
And they could take out an entire regiment on their own before they even get to strike back. And this is like, then they were like, okay, that's too much. You know, they saw, I think the designer said he saw tournaments for 5th, and it's like people were bringing armies of 12 models. And he's like, that's not what we wanted out of that. And it's cool that you can do that or whatever, but I want something more. I want you to actually bring units. And they just, maybe some people would say too far in the other direction.
The pendulum,
But I like that, though. I want units to matter. I want the mooks to matter. And I think over time, 7th and 8th, they kind of turn the dial back up to like, well, we want heroes to be good still. Although you might say 8th, I don't know. That's a discussion for another time.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, it's just, it sits in a perfect spot. It's complete. You can find everything relatively cheap. It's not a new system that's going to get changed. And if you want to change it, go ahead. Nobody's going to say anything.
Yeah.
So
unless you post about it online, then everyone will hate you.
Then everyone will have an opinion. But at the end of the day, honestly, even if you posted it online, I bet you'd be supported by a lot of people. You might get some disagreement, but you'd be like, hey, if you want to take a look at this, what do you think? This is what we thought.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any harm. So,
cool. Well, that's what we think about Warhammer Fantasy 6th edition. Coming up, we're going to look at a couple army books and do some more with this. But yeah, that's where we're starting, is with this game.
Hope to have you guys listen more.
Bye.
Bye.